want to pivot to Israel here. Even if you are, if one is a casual observer of what's happening over there and our relationship at this moment with Israel, it is bizarre. Like something is clearly afoot that is strange. Let's start with what's happening on the ground there right now. So Rafah is this region, 1.4 million people is what I'm hearing, the southernmost most portion of Gaza. And I guess Israel wants to do some military operations in that region. And our vice president is against it strongly. Here's what she said. Let me tell you something. I've studied the maps. There's nowhere for those folks to go. We've been clear in multiple conversations and in every way that any major military operation in Rafah would be a huge mistake. And the reporter said, excuse me, are you ruling out that there will be consequences from the United States? And she said, I'm ruling out nothing. We've been very clear that far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. We've been very clear that Israel and the Israeli people and Palestinians are entitled to an equal amount of security and dignity. What is happening there, Joel?
Well, if Kamala Harris has studied the maps, then she knows that Rafah is a town on the Egyptian border. So she knows two things. Number one, it's strategically vital that Israel control that town if it's going to stop Hamas, because being on the Egyptian border allows Hamas to import and export things, whether through the main crossing points or through tunnels underground. But it allows Hamas to bring in weapons and to send out people. It also allows Hamas to make money. The reason that Hamas leaders are billionaires is because they control the import and export of goods through tunnels through Rafah, and they collect the taxes and live lavish lifestyles in exile in Doha and in Turkey. So it's strategically important. You cannot defeat Hamas without controlling Rafah. Secondly, it's next to Egypt. So if she says there's nowhere for these Palestinian civilians to go, that's just wrong. They can go to Egypt. Why don't they go to Egypt? Egypt should be welcoming civilians on a temporary basis who are fleeing the conflict so that Israel can go after Hamas and the Hamas infrastructure. But Egypt's not doing that. In fact, there's not a single Arab country that has volunteered to allow Palestinian civilians to take refuge there. And that's for a variety of reasons. But the main reason is that there's this ideological opposition to Palestinians leaving any land that they claim is their own, because it is the duty, according, I suppose, to Arab public opinion, of Palestinians to stay where they are. And there's a fear that Israel will annex anything that Palestinians leave behind. By the way, my personal opinion, that wouldn't be a bad idea. It doesn't make any sense for this territory that has been a continuous source of terrorism and rockets against Israel in the last 20 years since Israel tried to leave it alone. It doesn't make any sense that that territory should still be under anybody's control except Israel. I think that it's a time for creative solutions. I think that a significant portion of Gaza's population should be allowed to stay, but my personal view, again, Israel should annex Gaza, and the population that wants to leave should be allowed to leave. A huge number of Palestinians actually want to leave Gaza, and not just because of the war. They want to leave. They want to go to other countries. They want to seek their fortune elsewhere in the Arab world. But the Arab and Muslim world has decreed that the fate of Palestinians is to stay on their land regardless and to die if terrorists want them to die. And anyway, so if she studied the maps, yes, Kamala Harris would know that there are actually options. But the U.S., which gives billions of dollars in aid to Egypt, has decided it doesn't have leverage over the Egyptian government to force them to allow Palestinian refugees into Egypt on even a temporary basis, promising that they can go home when the war's over. So this is just nonsense. As usual, Kamala Harris is telegraphing the administration's position. She did it a couple weeks ago when she said we have to distinguish between the Israeli government and the Israeli people, which was followed by an unprecedented rhetorical attack from the White House against Netanyahu. And now we see this UN resolution, the Security Council resolution that the U.S. allowed to pass, which de-links or makes the ceasefire demand independent of the demand to release the hostages. Before, the U.S. said, well, you can't have a ceasefire until you release the hostages. Now the U.S. went along with a resolution by Russia and China, or supported by Russia and China, that de-links the two issues, even though the White House claims otherwise. So Hamas is celebrating because they're getting what they wanted. They want a ceasefire first, and then let's talk about releasing the hostages. That allows Hamas to survive and gives Hamas more leverage. So Kamala Harris is the leading edge of a completely clueless administration that has managed to screw up in Israel, screw up in Ukraine, screw up in Afghanistan. They don't do anything right, nothing. And yet they claim that Netanyahu is overreacting when he's upset about this UN Security Council resolution. These are people who don't understand anything, who have messed everything up. Even the best, quote-unquote, members of the administration, like John Kirby, the national security spokesman, even he says ridiculous things and doesn't have a clue about what's going on in the Middle East. Sometimes he says the right thing. He's better than the rest of them. But for him to come out yesterday and say he was perplexed by Israel's decision to react angrily to this betrayal at the UN, I mean, they know exactly what they did. They did change their position. They did it to appease Russia and China and to appease Hamas and Iran. And I think the American people deserve to know why. Why is our administration constantly folding to America's enemy?
I got a couple different places to go. Trump, let me say this. Trump said, he told some Israel news outlet, finish up your war. And then about Joe Biden, he said he can't talk. He's a very dumb person. His foreign policy throughout 50 years has been horrible. If you look at the people that were in other administrations with him, they saw him as weak, ineffective president. Hamas would have never done that attack if I were there. Why is this administration not supporting Israel wholeheartedly when it comes to their military operations in Gaza at this moment? And I can't believe it's just because they want some votes in Michigan. It's got to be deeper than just that.
Well, Omri Seren, who's a pro-Israel policy wonk and who now, I believe, works for Senator Ted Cruz, said on Twitter or X yesterday that this is not just about votes in Michigan. Votes in Michigan are the excuse for the Biden administration to express the anti-Israel hostility that is building up in the Democratic Party, that is present among the younger generation of staffers, and that now finds its expression in these UN resolutions and these rhetorical attacks on Israel. Let me tell you where we are at the moment. Israel is going to have to go into Rafah to win the war. If they don't go into Rafah, they lose the war. The fate of the hostages is now very much in doubt, and that's because of this UN resolution, which allowed Hamas basically to assert its idea that a ceasefire comes before any hostage release, not that a ceasefire is a reward for a hostage release. So Israel's going to have to go it alone. They don't have a lot of ammunition, but they're going to have to go it alone in Rafah without U.S. support. There is a possibility this is all some elaborate kabuki dance where the Biden administration is pretending to oppose the Rafah operation, that it really wants Israel to win, but it has to oppose Israel in every possible way publicly so that Michigan voters don't blame Biden and the world doesn't hate America or something. But that's not as effective as simply doing what Trump said. Trump said, let Israel win, finish the job. That's what Israel wants to do. They want to finish the war. They want to finish the war. And Netanyahu was saying in mid-February already, okay, we're talking 6 weeks ago, that going into Rafah would mean the war would be over in weeks, not months. But there's been this delay now for 6 weeks while Netanyahu has tried to satisfy Biden's demands. And understandably so, because the U.S. is supplying arms and ammunition to Israel. And the U.S. wants, or Israel wants to get along with whatever administration is in office. That's why Netanyahu had to recognize Biden as the winner of the election in 2020, because he knew that if the administration is incoming, he has to be on its good side. Israel is a small country. It can't afford to do this kind of thing regularly where it would go against the United States, no matter who's in charge. But Trump is right. Let Israel win. By the way, that's why Hamas never attacked Israel during Trump's administration, because Trump's policy was, I'm going to let Israel do whatever it needs to do to win. When Hamas knew that, when Iran knew that, they didn't attack Israel because they knew that Israel would respond with massive force. But because Biden backtracked and backed away from Israel from the very beginning and is now back where the Obama administration was in 2016 in terms of appeasing Israel's enemies and attacking Israel at the UN or allowing Israel to be attacked, Israel's enemies are not afraid, and so they're pushing forward. They think they're winning. Despite the devastation in Gaza, despite the fact that Israel's killed 13,000 Hamas terrorists, Hamas thinks it's winning because they're getting these UN resolutions and these statements by the Biden administration.
Yeah, okay. And similarly, we talked with Senator Bill Hagerty from Tennessee about the border, and we played a clip from 60 Minutes where they talked to the president of Mexico. And the president of Mexico said, we will stop the flow of illegal immigration into your country if you commit to $20 billion a year, lift sanctions on Venezuela, end the Cuban embargo, and legalize the Mexicans who are living in the U.S. right now. So same thing, like seeing the witness, and they come at us with with these demands as the starting point. Trump would have had not, like, give me a break, like, no way. Well, the president didn't do that when Trump was in office. So I just want to emphasize that point about the UN resolution, because that's it. That's why I wanted to have you on, is to nail that. It's the decoupling of a ceasefire with the releasing of hostages. Because what's the justification for a ceasefire now, that it's Ramadan?
Yeah, ridiculous, right? I mean, it's not like the Muslim world has ever taken Ramadan as some kind of peaceful month. In fact, the last major military disaster for Israel was the Yom Kippur War of 1973. We call it the Yom Kippur War because Egypt and Syria attacked on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, when the entire country is in synagogue praying. It's the holiest day. And, of course, it's deeply offensive that you would attack someone on their holiest day, right? There's no qualms about attacking Jews on their holiest day, but whatever. It's called the Yom Kippur War. That year, Yom Kippur was also during Ramadan. So the Egyptian soldiers who were about to attack Israel were given permission by their religious chaplains to break their Ramadan fast so they could go and kill the infidels. I mean, the idea that Ramadan is some kind of peaceful month is completely contradicted by all of the evidence. And you go year by year back through history, so many wars in the Muslim world on Ramadan. They've continued through Ramadan. You know, we have some idea like it's going to be a World War I Christmas truce or something like that, you know, where the English soldiers and the German soldiers come out of their trenches and play a game of soccer before going back to killing each other. That's not what Ramadan is. And, you know, somehow it's something the Biden administration cares very deeply about, but Hamas was calling for an escalation during Ramadan. So, you know, it's just not.
Yeah, give me a break.